On January 26, 2017, the Utah Court of Appeals issued its decision in the case of In Re AB. The link to the court's full decision is provided in this link, and we include the link in the description section of this video report. The mother, AB, appealed the juvenile court's September 8, 2016 order placing her children in the permanent custody and guardianship of their grandfather. At the September 8, 2016 hearing, the juvenile court determined that returning the children to the custody of either parent would create a substantial risk or detriment to the children's physical or emotional well-being and would be contrary to the welfare of the children. The mother asserted that there was insufficient evidence to support the court's findings. Specifically, the mother claimed there was insufficient evidence to support the juvenile court's conclusion that it was in the best interest of the children to give the grandfather permanent custody, and that the juvenile court plainly erred in failing to enter findings of fact sufficient to enable review. The Court of Appeals disagreed. To overturn the juvenile court's decision concerning the permanent status of a child, the result must be against the clear weight of the evidence or leave the appellate court with a firm and definite conviction that a mistake has been made. The appellate courts review the juvenile court's factual findings based upon the clearly erroneous standard. A finding of fact is clearly erroneous only when, in light of the evidence supporting the finding, it is against the clear weight of the evidence. Further, the appellate courts give juvenile courts a wide latitude of discretion as to the judgments arrived at based upon not only the court's opportunity to judge credibility firsthand, but also based on the juvenile court judge's special training, experience, and interest in this field. Finally, when a foundation for the court's decision exists in the evidence, an appellate court may not engage in a re-weighing of the evidence. Utah Code Section 78A-6-314, subsection 2b, sets forth the standard to be considered in determining whether children should be returned to their parents' care. It is prima facie evidence that return of the minor to a parent or guardian would create a substantial risk of detriment to the minor if a parent fails to participate, comply with, or meet the goals of a court-approved service plan. It is undisputed that Mother failed to do any one of these things. Mother offered no legitimate justification for her failure to comply with the service plan. This in turn supported the finding that returning the children to the mother would create a substantial risk of detriment to the children. Evidence also demonstrated that the children were doing well in the grandfather's home, were receiving adequate care, and were experiencing stability in their lives that had previously been lacking. Together, this evidence supported the juvenile court's findings. Because a foundation for the juvenile court's decision exists in the evidence, an appellate court may not reweigh that evidence. Mother also argued that the juvenile court committed plain error by failing to enter findings of fact sufficient to enable judicial review. While the findings did lack detail and could have been more carefully drafted, they were not so deficient as to constitute plain error. There was prima facie evidence that return of the minors to the mother would create a substantial risk of detriment to the minors, which the juvenile court so found. Mother failed to present any evidence to rebut that prima facie evidence. Accordingly, based on these findings, the court was required to terminate reunification services and make a final determination regarding whether termination of parental rights, adoption, or permanent custody and guardianship was the most appropriate final plan for the minors. Of these options, permanent custody and guardianship was the least damaging option to the relationship between mother and the children. Therefore, having made findings so required by the applicable statute, the juvenile court did not commit plain error in failing to include additional findings.